Welcome into Courtside Seats with Kroeger, a Charlotte Hornets podcast. Here he is, Chris Kroeger.
All right, it's episode 36 of our podcast. It's Courtside Seats, and I feel like I've said this a million times, but I just genuinely mean it this time. I don't know if I've looked forward more to a podcast guest than this guy right here, who I'm just going to crown him the king of NBA Twitter. It's Worldwide Wob on the other side of the phone right now. Wob, what's going on, man? Welcome into the podcast.
Appreciate you having me. As we're filming, or not as we're filming this, but as we're recording this, we laid the Lakers to rest last night. I think they have a less than 1% chance of making the playoffs. And you've got the Hornets there in Charlotte that are kind of in a similar situation, trying to get to that 8th seed. So never a moment off with the NBA, that's for sure.
Never a dull moment. And so I want to talk about all this. It's funny, though, because I think people see you're a legend on Twitter. You are like I genuinely mean that. You've built NBA Twitter, not solely by yourself, but you're like one of the head purveyors of NBA Twitter. And so when you're cranking out content till the wee hours of the morning, and you and I will go inside baseball here. I said, hey, when are we going to talk today on the podcast? You said, call me at noon Eastern time. And so I call you, and I said, hey, man, what are you doing? You're like, I just woke up. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. You probably were working until just God knows when in the middle of the night cranking out NBA content.
Yeah, so the reason why I sound like this, not that I'm an excuse guy, but to make an excuse. I did just wake up before we filmed this, but the reason for that, as we discussed right before we started doing this, was, the Laker game last night, it didn't, it's national TV. It doesn't end until after 1 o'clock on the East Coast. And then LeBron, it takes him 30 minutes sometimes to give his post-game press conferences or, his interviews or whatever he's doing. And then you got to do some content on it. And then you look at the clock again, and it's 3:30. And you can't just, snap your fingers and go to bed. I have, other human things to do, whether it's paying bills or, going grocery shopping, whatever. Thankfully, I live in New York where there's 24/7 grocery stores, but sometimes I have to go do those things in the vampire hours of the night. Then I go to bed and it's 5:30, and I don't wake up until 1 or 2 o'clock, and I miss things like the Game of Thrones trailer dropping. But that's the sacrifices you have to make when you make ball life. Ball is not life, ball is life.
Look, man, some heroes out there, not all heroes wear capes. You know that, Wob, okay? You gotta make sacrifices. And I guess it's wild, too, because I think people would just assume, well, you're choosing to do this, and you're right, and so you love it. But, at the same time, this is the cycle, right? If you're going to crank out content around the NBA, you basically have to work third shift. It's just the only way it's going to work, right?
Yeah, I want to send out a special appreciation for anyone who covers the NBA on a national scale that has a family, a wife, a husband, kids, has to live normal hours. I just don't know how that's done. Because the NBA, if you live in the Eastern time zone or the Central time zone, is going super late at night. And if you have to wake up and be a part of that 9 to 5 schedule, I just don't know how that would be possible unless your body has the genetics to be able to just sleep 2 to 3 hours a night and wake up and, do your day. So, yeah, in the end, you have to be successful at anything. I think you have to be willing to commit your life to it. I'm in a situation, just being a single guy at the age of 31, that I have nothing better to do than watch basketball because I love doing it and it's my job. But I understand also that there's not a lot of people that have these resources and the ability to do so. So if you ever want to make the NBA a full-time thing for yourself, if you want to be a writer, a podcaster, a video guy, you have to be willing to commit to this lifestyle because there's going to be people like myself and there's going to be people that are still sleeping on their mom's basement's couch that want to make this their career, that are willing to put in that time and their work. So it's unfortunate that you have to, do that, but at the same time, we're also fortunate to get to do what we do.
But this is the whole idea of getting buckets, right? You've kind of created this mantra, this lifestyle of let's get buckets. But that's the idea of getting buckets, right? What you're just talking about, whatever it is, chasing the fun, the thrill, the whatever you're just motivated by. That's that whole idea of getting buckets, right?
Yeah. So I always say that getting buckets is not just a basketball culture; it's a lifestyle because buckets can range from a big scoop of chicken at Chipotle into your burrito. That was awesome. Thank you. That made my day. The bus pulling up right when you walk up to the bus stop on the curb at the very second you time it right. Or you're able to pursue your passion and your career at the very end. And again, having the opportunity to do so, I don't feel like I've worked a day in my life since I've started watching NBA 24/7. And when you go to bed not having to worry about do I love my job, do I hate my job, it's a very fortunate position which I'll never take for granted.
So take us into your apartment. What on earth is going on when you're watching NBA basketball? You have how many screens do you have going at any given time on League Pass? How many screens do you have up?
Well, I'm looking at it right now. I have 2 TVs, I have 2 laptops, and I have 3 tablets. And I can go quad box on the laptops, so I can handle up to 12 games at once. And there are a couple times throughout the season, the night before Thanksgiving, the night before Christmas Eve, the night coming out of the All-Star break and before the All-Star break, that they do 12 games at once, and it is a true test of my internet capacity and seeing if these tablets actually work and can handle it. So that's what it looks like. When you walk into the room, it just looks like there's a bunch of laptops on a table. So it's not anything that it looks like what's seen out of the Matrix, but watching them all at the same time, I only have 2 eyes, and they can only look in one position at the same time. So the ability to watch a game and be listening to others and listening for triggers from the crowd, that's something that thankfully I just have a lot of experience doing. So when you walk in here, it does sound like there's 12 games on at once, very similar to a sports bar. But the ability for me to get content is very reliant on my ability to keep an eye on games with my peripherals as I'm watching another one.
In some of these, you're cranking out videos, so you'll record whatever just happened. Like you said, okay, Kiss Camp, something happens at Staples Center, and it's going to be freaking laugh out loud hilarious. You want to post it. How do you grab that? Are you able to do that via software? Are you doing it? Sometimes I know you're doing it via what, cell phone or something, and just posting it, right? So how do you then, even if you find something, say, okay, I want to flag this right here and I want to use it and post it, how do you go then about posting it from that point?
Yeah, so there's no secret. I mean, you can see by the quality of the footage sometimes that I post that it's clearly from a cell phone camera. And people are asking, this is 2019, why are these clips not in HD? Do you know how easy it is to get an HD clip in 2019? You go to Clip It, you go to any of these websites, so you can pull HD footage. I understand that's how it can be done, and there's a reason why some of my footage is in HD. The reason why it's not all there is because when there is 12 games on, or if there's 6 games on for that matter, I have to shut down one of my computers, get rid of the quad box, cut the video, put it into Premiere real quick, zoom in, make it show you what I want to show you, and then post it. That's almost a 10-minute process sometimes. Sometimes I can do it a little bit quicker if it's a shorter video, but ultimately it's going to require my attention for those 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, I just miss watching what's happening in those 4 games that I shut that computer down for. Or the alternative is you decrease the quality, you grab it with your cell phone, it takes 30 seconds, and you keep going on. So in this case, I've sometimes sacrificed the quality of the video that you're watching to make it more bootleg for the ability to continue watching those other games in case somebody gets dunked on or there's a funny kiss cam or Benny the Bull moment, which you're referring to. And that's the reason for it. It's not by choice. I would love to put out HD footage if I could, but it's just not feasible when you're watching every single game by yourself. And the laborious process of just making something look that good has always been my biggest challenge. Maybe the day will come that I have someone to help me to put those videos on Twitter in HD that I'm talking about, but just being a guy sitting here watching it in my living room, that's what I'm working with now.
I kind of like the grainy footage, though. It adds this quality, almost like a filmmaker quality to it. Oh, look at in the seedy back rooms, what's being cut in the NBA film room by Wob right now. I like the cell phone quality to it. It adds a certain nostalgia to it, actually.
Yeah. So at this point, because everyone, for the most part, all of these networks and anyone that's grabbing videos to put on Twitter, I'd say most of them are in HD at this point. That I do agree. There's a VHS quality to it that there's a novelty of. Remember back in the days when we used to bootleg videos and put them onto that app Vine? Vine's an extinct animal at this point. When I was getting started, I didn't have Vine for 5 years.
Oh, geez.
So Vine to me came out of nowhere and was this brand new form of technology that helped me illustrate the things I was just tweeting into a box. And now it's been dead. I mean, it's been dead for years. So just bringing back that very Vine, that's what's something you would see on Vine back in the day, continues to resonate with the consumers.
Is this the question you get maybe more than any other? I know me and a lot of my friends have asked this. We've talked about this. We've wondered this. How do you not get heat from the NBA for posting all these videos? Because if this was the NFL or Major League Baseball or the NHL, I feel like you couldn't even do what you're doing right now. This couldn't be a career out of what you've built on Twitter and on social media. So how is it that the NBA's allowed you to do this? And maybe I'm wrong on this, but I feel like if this was another sports league, there's no way on earth you could carve out this niche.
Yeah, I would say I got a little lucky because the NBA has said publicly, and Silver specifically, that he's okay with these videos going viral on social media because he sees them as an free appetizer to get people outside the restaurant inside to buy the main course and the entree. So it is strictly a business strategy by the NBA to be very loose with individuals who post these short clips on Twitter. Now, if you're like broadcasting full games and using footage for official networks, they're going to come for you. Don't get that twisted at all. They still very much, enforce the copyright policy. But when it comes to social media, they've clearly found something in that their product is being consumed worldwide all of a sudden because we are allowing these clips to be on the internet. And while Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NHL, they don't share that same belief. There's business reasons for that because they want to monetize the content that they own. That is not necessarily a bad business strategy, but what the result of that is the marketing. You don't get the viral short clips engagement from the social media community when you are strictly censoring what everyone can see and consume. So I'm not going to say either league is right or wrong, but what I am going to say is the NBA has encourage the ability for its fans to engage with its content under any means possible. And it's within the reins of you're not monetizing this for like a network that hasn't already licensed the rights from the NBA. They seem to be very open to that.
Were you ever scared, like in the early days when these clips, because you're talking like now, it's not unusual. You'll go like find one of your tweets and there's obviously thousands of likes and retweets, but you'll get the video itself, which will have like 60,000, 70,000, hundreds of thousands of views, depending on what the video is. Like in the early days where your stuff really started to go viral, were you ever scared like, oh man, this actually might take off in a way to where people are obviously going to notice this and I might get shut down? Did that ever scare you back then?
I've never been worried about being shut down because the NBA has had this policy for really as long as I can remember. I don't think they made it public until just a couple of years ago, but I was willing to at least test to see if I got one of those DMCA takedowns from on Twitter for a copyright infringement or something. I've never gone to bed thinking, what if the NBA just decides tomorrow if they just stop wanting its users to put stuff on social media. But I've always been careful about it because if I ever put videos up with other sports or even like NBA players at the Olympics or the FIBA World Championships, things that aren't owned by the NBA, I'll put them onto one of my burner accounts and just retweet it from the main account just to make sure, I don't get a third strike or something from Twitter and get shut down over some video like that. So I'm certainly cognizant of it. But when you're talking about the actual NBA product itself, I don't think I've ever been worried about that.
Did we just learn something? You have burner accounts? Is this a revelation or is this out there? I'm unsure about this.
Oh, this is very public. I have like 40, and half of them are obvious. It's just me with my handle spelled differently. So instead of the L, it's a capital I that looks like an L, and it's my face, so it looks like it's coming from the same exact account. I have secret burner accounts too. Ooh. But we don't need to talk about that.
Okay, those are off limits. Have you ever thought about, and maybe you've actually been approached, I would wonder this, have you ever thought about like touching the third rail and actually joining forces with the NBA? Have they ever approached you about like doing stuff directly with them and working for them?
Yeah, definitely. Those are opportunities which come and go, and they're specifically around certain events and stuff. But I've worked with the NBA in the past, and they seem pretty open to it. And as long as I don't do anything that rocks the boat in terms of a relationship with them. There's some certain things certainly that you can talk about with the NBA or the officials that would make them angry. So I have to walk this line of continuing to always be honest and be myself. And that's why the people keep coming back to this Twitter account is I know they're going to get an authentic opinion. But at the same time, I never want to say anything that's malicious without any sort of proof or that's slanderous, right? That goes after them without something to back it up. So I've never crossed that line. I think I've tiptoed it a couple times in the past, but yeah, it's been a fruitful relationship for as long as I can remember.
Have you ever gotten talked to directly, not by like an agent or a handler, but like by a player for something that you posted? Were like, hey, they got put on a poster or crossed over or something, just any clip that gets posted, and they obviously get put on a highlight reel for the wrong reason, and they look bad and they feel like you've done them wrong. Have you ever heard back from a player because they didn't like the way that the way you've posted stuff and it made them look?
I just get asked this question a lot. The answer is it's never happened privately. No one's like slid into my DMs and say, "Hey, you're in the wrong here. Delete this."
Right.
Usually, they just quote tweet the viral video and will put it on Twitter for the whole world to see if they're displeased with something. But again, I never really post anything that is not justified, and I'm sure that could be argued 10 times over, but if someone gets their ankles broken and I see that they didn't trip over somebody's foot and they actually got their ankles broken, I'm going to put the video up.
Yeah.
And there's not much you can do to defend that. Don't get your ankles broken if you don't want me to put the video up. But if I were to do something like if they got their ankles broken because they didn't see the pick coming and they tripped over Rudy Gobert's foot, and I'm like, oh, ankles broken. Like, that's a time when they're like, come on, dude. Like, that's debatable at best. So, I'm pretty well trained at this point while the world is putting out these, skull emoji, ankles broken. I see that there's a reason why you won't see it on my feed. So, specifically we're talking about the LeBron stuff last night where he let the ball roll up for, 75 feet on the court and then he just launched it as soon as he picked up. Well, that video is going viral. And I'm like, that was a 2-for-1 that he was doing.
Yeah.
And he just did that the other night. And then there's another viral play where he got shoved by Kyle Kuzma. And the joke is, even LeBron's players are upset with him and they're shoving him around to make him play defense. But when you actually watch the broadcast back and not just the video that crops it out, like there was an off-ball screen going on and Gallinari was popping and there was no communication between Kuzma and LeBron, so he wisely pushed him. And I'm like, well, it's really funny, and I certainly contribute to those jokes at times, which doesn't help the problem. So I do sound like a little bit of a hypocrite, but I have become more well-trained and better educated at doing those when they're appropriate. Like when LeBron is slouching and his body language is absolutely terrible after something doesn't go his way, that may be something that's deemed, a video, but filtering these out is always the biggest challenge.
All right, so let's talk about you and how you even let's backtrack big time. We'll talk about how you even carved out this lane, and it's a major lane. It's like a four-lane highway you're on in the NBA right now. But you started your college career. You went to UNC, right? You're a Tar Heel.
I am. Yeah, I graduated in 2009. I was able to see a couple national championships. Tyler Hansbrough never once lost at Duke. And I can tell you, if there's the only thing that is probably as sweet as winning a national championship is beating Duke at Cameron. There's no better feeling than beating those guys in front of those fans on that court. And we didn't lose once. So plenty of storming at Franklin Street from our nearby house.
So when you were in school, what did you think? Maybe, and I know I was this way when I first went to school. A lot of people were this way. You have no freaking idea what you're going to do as a career. Maybe you did know, but when you went to Carolina, what are you thinking? Like beyond school, after I get out of school, this is what I may do, or I want to do, or I'm certain I'm going to do. What were you thinking back then? I
went to school. I know this is going to be hard to believe, and I still get made fun of for it to this day. I went to school to be a meteorologist because I loved weather. I know it's so weird, but I was good at it. I loved it. And at the time, just those years that I was about to graduate college, I ended up not getting into it just because it was the peak of the recession and there was not a job to be had. Even with people with degrees from Carolina or any college, you could not get any job anywhere unless it was in sales. So I went to school originally to be a meteorologist. I pivoted to journalism and broadcast communications. And I liked doing it, but when I was doing the school it was called Carolina Week. You know, it was the student news program over there. It was a whole lot of fun, but I just never saw that as something. I couldn't ever do like traditional news. I just wasn't that good at it, to be honest. So I ended up not doing anything with journalism whatsoever when I graduated school, but I knew I wanted to be in the NBA still if I could. So I took a sales job, a very inside sales, entry-level position with the then New Orleans Hornets to sell season tickets. It was basically, here's a phone book, prove yourself, start selling stuff. And that was my entry into the NBA. And it was awesome because even though there's a lot of pressure to perform and to sell, and you got the burden of, if you don't sell, you can potentially get fired on your shoulders at any time, and anyone listening to this in sales can certainly appreciate that. It did give me a gateway into the NBA, being exposed to it every single day. So despite going to school for something completely different, I didn't really use that diploma for anything other than the ability to write and the ability to feel confident speaking in front of people.
Were you always you're a giant Knicks fan. Were you always an NBA fan, though? I'm sure you were a sports fan of other stuff, too. But were you always, as a kid, thinking, man, I just love the NBA more than everything else?
Yeah, yes. The NBA has always been, my first love. I've followed it since I went to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals in 1994 in Indianapolis. It's being such a diehard Knicks fan. My dad was in sales, and my mom as well at NBC Sports. And they, at the time, they had the NBA. So just flying out to Indianapolis to play the Knicks at the age of 7, for as long as I can remember, basketball has been a part of my life, and my mom went to Carolina as well. So, both basketball and UNC basketball was always involved, and I knew I wanted to do something with it because it was what I enjoyed doing, was watching these games.
So what led you to – how long were you working with the Hornets? You were at the New Orleans Hornets, like you said, doing inside sales, doing ticketing. How long were you there, and then what was your next move from there?
Yeah, I was there almost 2 years. I think a full 2 years. We're straight out of graduation through 2012. I actually ended up leaving the Hornets at the beginning of 2012 to actually start my own ticket brokerage because working in the ticket business for so long, I started seeing how much money those ticket brokers were making on the other side. And for people that don't know the ticket brokerage business, ticket brokers are individuals, corporations that buy tickets in mass quantities for the purpose of reselling them. They're not beloved by any means by the concert consumer because they're the ones that are hoarding all the tickets and setting the market on them. So when I ended up leaving, I took all the money that I had made and saved up, and I knew I wanted to start my own brokerage. And I remember going home, for one Christmas break, and I watched the Dallas Mavericks play. They were playing the San Antonio Spurs, and Burke just came back from a knee injury and was being hurt. And I watched them. Just in that moment, something hit me that this team is going to win the NBA championship this year. Maybe it was 2011. I got my years mixed up, but I said they're going to win the NBA title that year. And the Mavericks at that point had been a team that is like the Indianapolis Colts of the NBA. They were 13-3, the best regular season team you've ever seen, and then they would just sputter in the playoffs. And I'm like, this is it. This is the year. And these fans have been lusting for a deep playoff run since they lost to the Miami Heat in the 2000s. So I took all of my money and I put it into buying Dallas Mavericks season tickets, as many as I could buy. And not only did they win the championship, but they played the Lakers, they played the Thunder, they played LeBron's Miami Heat. Like, the draw of the ticket was as big as it ever was. So I knew in that moment I was onto something there. And ultimately, we're getting to like the 2012, 2013 time. Groupon was the website on the internet. Everyone, whether you were rich, poor, somewhere in between, they had Groupon. And the same way that LinkedIn formed as a sub Facebook, like a professional Facebook, I wanted to start a Groupon for sports tickets. And I met my eventual business partner, and we ended up starting that. It was called Crowd Seats back in the day. We started a company called Crowd Seats, which was going to be the Groupon for sports tickets. And as a part of that, I had to move out to Los Angeles, where he was based. But it was very startup, where I was very much shaking the couch for rent, for change to pay rent and stuff. And we eventually ended up selling the company, which was great. And it segued me into my full-time career today.
And so the thing you're doing now, which is just content creator around the NBA. That started as like a subset, right? Like out of a hobby when you were doing some of the other stuff corporate-wise, just to kind of fulfill time, right? Like to kind of find some joy. You were doing like the social media stuff, and now that's how this took off, right? But back then that was just like, I need something to do to like find an outlet and like, and now, and look, is that fair? Like that's how this whole thing started.
I think that's pretty accurate. So my Twitter account was established in 2008, I want to say, which would be the end of my junior year in college, and I was just using it to comment on basketball games that I was watching for the most part. And it was much just like the reason why a lot of people on Twitter, they want to vent their opinions on things, and that's how it started. So as I graduated college and I went into the more entrepreneur's life, you know, at some point, again, I was doing my tweeting at the Hornets and stuff like that, but when I was doing the full 24/7 entrepreneur stuff, this is more of a hobby or still just, it was never a full-time content creation opportunity, but when we sold the ticket business, we were equity hired, so it wasn't a straight acquisition and you just go on your merry way. We were under contract at the company that purchased us for a couple of years, so I went back to that more 9-to-5 lifestyle that allowed me to have like a life again and just not being married and not have kids. I watched a lot of NBA, and from that point on, the content side of my career, you know, slowly, organically began to develop more and more, and I had time to start writing blog posts and analysis and doing videos and stuff like that. And I just evolved with the technology. So when Vine became a thing, like I said, it allowed me to illustrate what I was watching. And then 2014 comes around, 2015, Periscope, it comes a thing, and that allows me to broadcast live to the world. So I tried this thing out late at night at 3 a.m., coming back to the bar after I struck out, making pizza rolls. And that's why we always say on Buckets, we've gone from pizza rolls to prime time, because the first ever Periscope was me cooking pizza rolls in front of 50 people. And I said, wow, 50 people actually watch this. Maybe I should try it again at a normal hour and talk about something of substance. And 50 became 500, which became 5,000, which became 50,000, as high as I think we've gotten up to 1.5 million, you know, at some point on Buckets. And we talk about Periscope now like it's a given, right? It's such an easy option. At the time, it was a revelation of technology, like inexplicable, unfathomable technology in 2015. So I've always just been one step ahead of technology. I can always thank as giving me these opportunities and these gateways, because I wouldn't be here without it.
Do you remember the first thing, maybe there wasn't actually a light bulb moment, but do you remember a light bulb moment, whether it was a video you posted or a Periscope you did, where you're like, wow, there actually are a lot of people consuming what I'm doing right now? Was there ever like a line of demarcation where you're like, this is actually taking off, this is actually going somewhere right now? Yeah,
you know, I do get asked this question a lot, and my answer is the same, that I never had a Ken Bone moment. Ken Bone, for those of you who don't remember, was the guy who stood up at the Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton debate. He was in the red sweater asking those questions, and he like went hockey stick viral overnight. I'm talking like millions of followers across different platforms. Everyone wanted to know the story of this Ken Bone guy and why he was so interesting, and he looked funny and, you know, whatever. I never had that moment, and I attribute that to where I'm at today, because everything that's been built to this point has been a slow, organic drip. It's been the same since day one. I can still recognize the same commenters that were there back in 2011, 2012, and just kind of staying the course in terms of the content I create, always being authentic like that, is certainly a new level of appreciation from the longtime followers. And any of these networks out there that you see have become successful have similar stories that, you know, they've been doing the same stuff for 11, 12 years. They've built a loyal fan base. And as it continues to grow, they stay loyal to that message. And a lot of people have come to appreciate that. So there was no overnight success. I can attribute my success to just a lot of, certainly a lot of hard work, that slowly paid off.
Well, and to that point, I guess you were talking about this earlier, like, oh, maybe eventually I'll have a staff or whatever, and I'll be able to crank out everything more efficiently and at a higher quality. But, I mean, in a weird way, like that cult following you have, it helps in terms of, like, getting tips, right? Like people, oh, man, even if you missed something for a second because you were cutting up a video or whatever, people are chiming in, letting you know, hey, Wob, did you see what happened here? And also, like, this has become what I think one of the most fascinating and entertaining aspects of, like, some of the content you post is the following you have during the free agency period and leading up to it, when people are tipping you off on who's liking whose Instagram posts and who's following who. Like, that whole thing that's become the number one piece of content you crank out during the off season to me, because I just find all of it's just so ridiculous yet so entertaining at the same point, and everybody's chiming in on it. It's crowdsourcing at its finest.
Yeah, if you want to talk about the reasons, I guess, why I'm here today, I've always given a voice to the comment section, and not just, when I say voice, not just like listening to their comments and like responding to them. They have a voice in the content I create. So a lot of the things that we do on the show buckets, that we did on the show buckets, or that I'll put onto a website that I work for, an article, a lot of those ideas are spawned in a Periscope session from the commenters themselves, and they like that not only am I hearing their voice, but I'm taking their feedback and I'm always reacting and evolving to it. And the fact that they feel like they have equity in this account that they follow, not only are they fans of it, but I feel like I've contributed to this account's success. And at the same time, he's willing to recognize me for it. It's a very symbiotic relationship here that I know I wouldn't be here without the comment section, and the comment section feels the same way. And maybe it's more mutualism than anything, but they certainly are responsible for a lot of the stuff that I create and do. And they've gotten to the point now, it has evolved to the comment section is 3 branches of government. There's the Common Senate, which is the legislative. There's the Knights Wob, which are like the lawyers. They're the judiciary. Then you've got other factions like Late Night BYU. They have their own like representation now. So I didn't ask for any of this, but the following, has become so engaged that I've allowed them, given them the permission and ability to kind of form their own channel within my channel. Sometimes I'll even stop talking in Periscope. I'm like, you guys are clearly want to just have this Periscope to yourself. I'm going to go grab an Eskimo pie and I'll be back in 5-10 minutes. So that has happened before. And, sticking to that and always making sure that I'm reading the comments, giving credit where credit is due, has always proven to be successful, not just for myself, but anybody else.
All right, last thing, we'll wrap and talk some NBA. What the bleep, man? What the bleep is going on with the Lakers and LeBron, Wob? What is this? I don't think anybody. I mean, even if people doubted they would make the playoffs, I don't think anybody thought it would go like this. What the heck is going on with LeBron right now?
I mean, he signed up for this before the season started. The moment they wouldn't trade away the Lonzos, the Ingrams, the Kuzmas for Kawhi Leonard at first, and then for Anthony Davis, whether that's true or not, LeBron signed up with the Lakers knowing you're going to be lucky to just make the playoffs. And I got my feet held to the fire at the beginning of the season when I said, I'm not sure if this Lakers team can make the playoffs, and I think the best case scenario for them is a 7 or 8 seed. That was absurd. LeBron has been to God knows how many finals, let alone playoffs in a row. But this team is flawed, and they're in a Western Conference where you can't take nights off against teams like the New York Knicks and the Orlando Magic. Right, the Cavs were playing those teams 4 times a year when LeBron was there. And you don't get to do that when you're in the West. You're playing the Thunder, the Rockets, the Spurs, all of these great teams 4 times versus twice. So asking LeBron to be this Game 7 LeBron that we know he can still be in March, it's just not going to happen in year 16. Like, he's not going to, if he does that now, then he'll have nothing left for the playoffs.
You think he overestimated? Do you think he really thought, hey, it'll be easier, I can pull this off, even if we can just sneak in as a 7 or 8 seed? Or do you think he knew it was going to be this tough?
I want to say both. I mean, he's LeBron, so he knows how great he can take the Toon Squad and make the finals through the Eastern Conference like he did with the Cleveland Cavaliers last year, where the second best player on that team, if Kevin Love wasn't on the floor, was like J.R. Smith. So there was certainly no doubting himself, but this is a completely different beast in the Western Conference with the spotlight of the Lakers and the purple and gold. Like, every night was going to be scrutinized. And while he certainly dealt with the criticism fine, in the end, this team is just not that good, and they've never been that good. The young guys are developing, and they're going to be good. But we're talking about where the top 8 teams are like almost legitimate title contenders. So I'm not surprised, but I am surprised because it's LeBron and the Lakers. That's the only reason why we're surprised. If we looked at this roster on paper, not knowing anything about LeBron James, no, nobody should be surprised.
What are the odds you give one of these teams from the East? And I think they're all really good in really different ways, which is why I think the Eastern playoffs are going to be really fun, especially when you get to the second round. But what are the odds you give one of these teams, whether it's Milwaukee, Toronto, Philadelphia, and I'd say Boston? I don't know if anybody really gives Indiana a chance, which isn't fair to them, but whatever. I mean, Oladipo's down, so it's a tough break. But what do you give the odds that either Toronto, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, or Boston finds a way to make it to the finals and actually knock off Golden State? What are the odds of that?
I'm sticking to my guns here. The only team that has a chance at beating the Warriors this season, realistically, or at least forcing them to at least six games, are the Toronto Raptors. I think they're the best team in the Eastern Conference. I think they match up best with Golden State. And the reason for that is a couple of things. First of all, their depth. They stole Marc Gasol from the Memphis Grizzlies. They've got guys with absurd Inspector Gadget length, like Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, Danny Green, even Van Vliet. They have 4 lockdown defenders on that team.
And
I'm not even getting into the DeLon Wrights and such.
Yeah.
They've got guys that can close for you, whether it's Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry. They check every box necessary to be a championship contender. And if there's one team that has given the Warriors problems, it's teams that can influence those jump shots, and that's usually done with length. Because when you're behind on the screen, you make up for that with athleticism and wingspans and such. So I know it's a very wingspan-esque era that we're in now, and sometimes it's overhyped, but the athletes that the Toronto Raptors have and their ability to just grind out games in the half court when things aren't going your way. Sometimes you just need to pass the ball to your star and say, go get us a bucket. That's going to happen in the playoffs no matter what team you play for. And the Toronto Raptors have about 2 or 3 guys that they can do that with. So I'm fully confident that they're going to come out of the East. I'm not going to say that they're going to beat the Warriors, but it's going to be one of those eyebrow, like, hold on a second. The Warriors just lost home court advantage, and they have to go to Toronto. Do we have a series here type of moments that we've seen in the past?
And I'll say this, like, I know on a sliding scale here it's a little different, but I think somehow still, for obvious reasons, Kawhi Leonard is still undervalued, and at his highest peak that he can be, and I'm not sure he can climb there, but I think he's getting close to it again. He is arguably the best two-way player in the NBA all around, and when playoff mode gets activated, like, I don't think that enough has been talked about with that. Like, Kawhi in the playoffs, in a deep playoff run, like, that's a deciding factor to me. To your point, like, I'd bet on that guy right now because he's a freaking cyborg when he's on the court.
He's the best on-ball defender the league has seen in a long time. So he can lock down your opposing star, and he has multiple game winners already this season. So he has become not just a Spurs system player, and he's proved that. That was his biggest knock, was what if Kawhi ever gets traded? Like, can he survive without Popovich? And the answer is clearly yes. This is a jaw-dropping basketball talent that if he was even close to being as vocal as some of the other stars, would be getting the same press and the same popularity that the Durants and LeBrons and Anthony Davises and Giannis's of the world get. But Kawhi, just being a very quiet guy north of the border, is not going to get that same attention. In the end, he is a basketball nuclear weapon. And I have all the confidence in the world that he's going to single-handedly carry them out of the Eastern Conference.
Can we say this about Kemba, though? Like, and I feel like this has been lost in the grand scheme of things, Wab. Like, we talk about legacies and what's a guy's legacy. Not everybody's legacy in the NBA can be, I'm an NBA champion, or I'm a finals MVP, or I'm a multi-time MVP. Like, I think Allen Iverson carved out a lane. Obviously, he's one of the most dynamic scorers, electric players in NBA history, and especially at his size. And I think Kemba has done the same thing, right? Like, he has epitomized chip on the shoulder. Everybody doubted me. I keep proving people wrong. And to do it at his frame is unreal. And I heard Tracy McGrady, I think, say this a few weeks ago on The Jump. Like, there is something to be said, because this has now become a market inefficiency. If you spend your entire career with one team in one uniform, like, that's iconic. Like, nobody does that anymore. So if Kemba is a Hornet for life, and he's broken every major team record now at this point, and he's basically an all-NBA caliber player now, like, that's pretty iconic, because nobody saw that coming when he came out of UConn, and to do it in a city for his entire career, like, there's something to be said for that. There aren't a lot of guys doing that out there right now.
Yeah, if he ends up signing the Supermax with the Hornets, he's going to be an all-star for a foreseeable future, and he will, I think at some point, I'm trying to think who's the face of the Hornets franchise throughout history. Like, are we going back to the Larry Johnson, Mourning, Kendall? Like, who is it, in your opinion?
I'd say Dell because of the longevity, but if it's not him, I say Alonzo, LJ, Muggsy. Although, in my opinion, you and I are of the same age. Like, I watched Glenn Rice and Baron Davis be really incredible players that had, like, not only impacts in Charlotte, but across the NBA. I mean, Glenn Rice was one of the most electric scorers in the NBA. I think he finished second in scoring one year in the NBA behind MJ. So you're right, though. I mean, I think every other guy who's been here has been here for 2-3 years, been really good, and then they're either traded or they move on elsewhere. Dell has been the only other player alongside Muggsy, now with Kemba, who have done this for 8 to 10 years at a time. Before that, it's been, there hasn't been a single guy who's done it that long.
So, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. All the players that you just named, from Alonzo to LJ to Glenn Rice. Alonzo, I remember him on the Miami Heat. Larry Johnson, I remember him as a 4-point play with the Knicks. Glenn Rice, I remember him with the Lakers and whatever. There hasn't been a face of the Hornets that's been there for over a decade that has been this good. I think you are talking about the Rocky statue for Kemba Walker at some point, because when he is that good, he's always going to perform. He has the incredibly attractive narrative of being this undersized guard who fights battles on the court. He goes to war for Charlotte every single night, and in the way he plays, I think is going to resonate with that city, that he will be the first front-facing jersey in the rafters. Like, when you think Charlotte Hornets, by the time he's done, I think the first thing you will always remember is Kemba Walker.
All right, we'll end with this, and Kemba's a good pivot point to do it. Best handles in the NBA. I want to go top 5. You're watching these guys night in and night out when they're cooking. Do you have a top 5 handles in the NBA? This actually could be in no uncertain order if you want, but top 5 handles in the NBA for Worldwide Wob. What do you got?
Well, 5 is a lot, but I know who number 1 is, and that's Kyrie.
Okay, I agree.
It's not even close. Like, he's got and one mixtape. It's things you can't even do in video games. I play NBA Street for PlayStation 2 still to this day, and he makes it look better than a video game. So Kyrie's number 1. Kemba Walker is on the list. I don't know where he is, but you want to talk about those World War handles.
Agreed.
Like, Kemba Walker's from the Bronx, and he grew up playing at Rucker and Dyckman and a lot of those courts up here where every pickup game is a performance. And his handles, show that he's just grown up with sleeping with the basketball by his side. And when he walks home from the court, he's probably dribbling it with him. You can see that in his game today. So his handles are always, I feel like they're more violent, and Kyrie's are a little bit more finesse despite his violent finishes. But Kemba's on that list. And, Derrick Rose, back in the day certainly had them, but I would say those two are at the very top. Kyrie, Kemba, and then everything else after that is probably debatable.
You know who actually doesn't get enough credit for this, and I think it's because of his size, and people just generally don't like the way he plays. I think there's a lot of fans that feel this way. But James Harden, to me, top 5 handles in the NBA. Agree or disagree?
He has top 5 handles because of the way the NBA rules are just. You can't touch anybody.
Easy.
So his head, no, I know. It's just, his skill. I'm not saying it's anything that's going to get him in trouble, but his skill is extremely high.
So high.
And he bends the rules as far as they can go without breaking. And part of that is because he creates his own luck. So while it's not always the prettiest thing to look at, Harden's crossover, his step back, his ability to get to the rim is unquestioned. So Is he in my top 5 sexiest handles list? Probably not, but that shouldn't mean you take away from what he's accomplished.
Well, I've already taken too much of your time, so plug everything, everywhere that you're doing stuff. Action Network now on the app. People can get your content for free there, of course, on Twitter as well. But just tag everything. How can people consume more of Worldwide Wob out there on the internet right now?
Yeah, I'm over at the Action Network, so that's at Action Network HQ on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. ActionNetwork.com, and also the Action Network app is free in the App Store. It is the most gorgeous. You want to talk about something that's sexy? If you need a new score app where you need scores and fantasy and gambling lines and advice and news, this is certainly the place to get it.
And, of course, follow him on Twitter at Worldwide Wob, and you can check out all the periscopes and police chase videos you want. He had a good one cooking last night on Twitter as well. Rob, it's a pleasure to talk to you, man. It's been long overdue, and we'll have to catch up again maybe during the summer, but I really appreciate you making some time. It was good to catch up with you.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate the time.
That's going to do it. Another episode of Courtside Seats. How awesome was Rob Perez, Worldwide Wob on Twitter, and he's the king of NBA Twitter, and he's got an awesome story, just kind of chasing what he wanted to do in life, and it's turned out pretty well for him. So it's cool to catch up with him and see everything he's doing and hear the story behind his rise to popularity with the NBA. If you've missed any of our previous episodes of Courtside Seats, you can check us out on our YouTube channel, our official Charlotte Hornets YouTube channel. Just search Charlotte Hornets. You can search Courtside Seats, Kroeger, whatever. You'll find us. So just find us there. You can see all of our great content posted all the time. Hornets.com, the Hornets mobile app. You can also find us on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever podcasts are available, including Apple Podcasts. So just search us again, Courtside Seats or Kroeger or Hornets. Subscribe, rate, and review, and you can catch all the previous episodes and get pushed to your device each week when a new episode comes out. And speaking of which, we'll see you next week, another edition of Courtside Seats.